Hello everyone. Okay, so the next program in chapter 7 is Rainfall Statistics. So design a program that lets the user enter the total rainfall for each of the 12 months into a list. The program should calculate and display the total rainfall for the year, the average monthly rainfall, and the months with the highest and lowest amounts. Okay, so I want us to break this program into functions, and the first function I want us to create is a function that's going to get the rainfall amounts from the user. So I'm going to define the first function. I'm going to call this function get rainfall amounts. So get rainfall amounts. We have to determine if this function is going to accept in any argument, so we can define some parameters. I want this function to receive a list, okay, that contains the names of the months. So it will basically receive as an argument a list that contains January, February, March, April, basically the names of all the months in a year, right? So let's do that. I'm going to create a placeholder for it, a parameter for it. I'm going to call it names of month. And we will basically use these names, okay, in our output. So in our output to the user, when we want to ask the user to please enter the rainfall amount for January, please enter the rainfall amount for February, and so on and so forth. All right, so in this function, what I want to do also is, see, there are 12 months in a year, right? So I'm going to store that value as a constant. So I'm going to create that constant. I'm going to call this number of months in a year. I'm going to set it equal to 12. So when you're naming constants, by convention, you want to make sure that you're named with uppercase, and if they're more than one word, you separate them with an underscore. All right, so what I want to do is to create a loop that's going to iterate this number of times, 12 times. And each time, I'm going to ask the user to enter the rainfall amount, okay, for each of the months. Now I can create a loop so that it says, please enter the rainfall amount for month 1, okay, and then please enter the rainfall amount for month 2, and so on and so forth. But I want to use the names in this names of months list, okay, so it's more meaningful. So it says, please enter the rainfall amount for January. So I'm going to create a loop that's going to iterate 12 times. I'm going to create a target variable, and the target variable is going to hold or represent our indices or indexes that we can use to access names from this list or any list, or we can use it to do other things. I'm going to call this target variable current month index. And I'm going to create a range. So for current month index in range, for the range, I'm going to pass in this value here, which is number of months in a year. So number of months in a year will contain 12. If I type in 12 here, it's going to create a range from 0 to 11. So if I type in 12 here, for example, basically typing in this is like typing in 12 here. This will create a range from 0 to 11. What it means is the first time this loop iterates, 0 will be assigned to current month index, and we can use it in our loop. The second time it iterates, 1 will be assigned to current month index, and we can use it, and so on and so forth. So think about it for a second here. Names of month is going to be a list that will contain 12 names, and we know that list elements in a list have indexes or indices. If we have 12 elements, the first item, which is the number 1 item, will have an index of 0. And then the last item will have an index of 1 less than the length of the list. So if we have a list containing 12 items, the length of the list is 12. The first item has an index of 0. The 12th item will have an index of 11, right? Indexes start from 0, okay? So when you pass in 12 here, it creates a range from 0 to 11 also. The range function will create a range from 0 to 1 less than whatever you type here. 12 is like the ending number, the ending limit, but it's not included in our range. 12 will create a range from 0 to 11. If you type in, let's say, 16 here, this will create a range from 0 to 15. 16 is the ending limit, but it's not included. So the trick of what I'm trying to do, not the trick, but basically what I'm trying to achieve here is when I put in number of months in a year here, it will create a range from 0 to 11, and each time it's going to assign numbers, these numbers 0 to 11 to current month index. First time it will contain 0, second time it will contain 1. Also, the names of months list will have names, and these indexes will also be from 0 to 11. What I can do is I can use the values or the index stored in here, the current index, because it will change. First time will be assigned 0, second time will be assigned 1, and so on and so forth. It will change. I can use the index here to access the particular name in this list, right? It makes sense. If it's 0, then I'll use it to access the name of the month in index 0. Okay, with index 0. January will have an index of 0. February will have an index of 1. There'll be 12 elements here, index 0 to 11. And then this variable here will also store numbers from 0 to 11. So I can use it to kind of access the element in this list here. It's very important. We're going to use the same idea to create loops going forward. So that's why I'm taking time to make sure it's clear. All right, so each time in this loop, I want to ask the user, using the input function, to enter the rainfall amount for the particular month. And the way we know the particular month is by using our current month index. So I'm going to call the input function and display a message to the user saying, please enter the rainfall amount, okay, for. And then now I'm going to concatenate it with that current month. I can use a name of the month list, and I can know the current month by the current month index. So this will, assuming whoever calls this function has to pass in a list containing the names of the month. Okay, so assuming that list has been passed to it, we're accessing the current month as a string. I don't know if you can see this line over here. This line is like a guideline for me not to exceed about 79 characters on a line. I think it's 79. It's a Python standard not to exceed 79 characters on a line, and I want to follow that. And so if I'm exceeding this line here, I want to break it into 2 without destroying anything. So I'm going to break it somewhere around here where the cursor is. Before you break any line, you have to type in a backslash. So I type in a backslash and I hit enter. So I've broken the line into 2, but I haven't messed it up. It still works the same way. So this input function will display this message to the user, type in the rainfall amount. But the thing is, whatever the user types is going to be returned as a string. We can't use strings in calculations. We need a number. In this case, we need a floating point number. The rainfall amount can be 22.5 something. I don't know the units for rainfall, but let's say it's something, millimeters or something. Whatever the user types will be returned as a string, and we don't need a string. We need a number. In this case, a float. And so we need to convert whatever the user types to a float. So I'm going to surround whatever the user has typed with the float function. We are converting it to a float, and once we convert it to a float, we need a place to store it. And so I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to call it monthly rainfall, because this will be the rainfall amount for a particular month. And so monthly rainfall will store whatever the user has typed converted to a float here. And then what I want to do, the program over here said, design a program that lets the user enter the total rainfall for each of the 12 months into a list. So we need to store these values into a list. So in our function here, I'm going to create a list, and I'm going to call it rainfall amount. Let's call this total rainfall list. Okay, so total rainfall list, so we can know it's a list. And I'm going to initialize it to an empty list. But once we get a particular rainfall amount, the next thing I want to do is to append that value to the list. So total rainfall list dot append. Now what do we want to append to the list? We want to append this current monthly rainfall, this monthly rainfall here. We append it to the list, and then we take the next value, we append it to the list, and so on and so forth. So by the time this loop is done, we'll have our list with all the rainfall amounts. And when we're done, let's just return that list, total rainfall list. And we're done with this function. All right, so the next function I want us to create is a function that's going to calculate the total. The program says the program should calculate and display the total rainfall for the year. So the question says we should do that. So I'm going to create a function that's going to calculate the total rainfall for the year. So I'm going to call this calculate total rainfall. Let's do that. So if it's going to calculate the total rainfall, then let's define a parameter that's going to serve as a placeholder for the list of rainfall amounts, right? If it's going to calculate the total rainfall, it needs the total the rainfall amounts for each month. in order to calculate the total. So I'm going to define a parameter, a placeholder, and this is going to be the total rainfall list. I'm just giving it a name here. It doesn't matter that this name is the same as this name here. It doesn't matter. The scope of this variable is within this calculate total rainfall function. And the scope of this total rainfall, the scope of this total rainfall list here, these ones, is within the get rainfall amount function. So they're like twins, okay, but they're not the same. They don't see each other. They're considered different because they're in different functions. All right, so to calculate the total rainfall amounts, we have all the total rainfall amounts. To calculate the total rainfall, we have all the monthly rainfall amounts stored in this list. So we have to loop through this list and then accumulate all the values into a variable. That variable, I'm going to call it total rainfall. I'm going to set it equal to 0. And now let's create a loop to go through this list here. So I'm going to create a target variable. This target variable is going to represent the current monthly rainfall index, because this list here contains the monthly rainfall amounts. So current monthly rainfall index, right? Yeah. So current monthly rainfall index in range. I'm going to create a range. And over here for the range, I'm going to use the length of this particular total rainfall list. So if there are 12 monthly rainfall amounts, then the length of the list is going to be 12. And it's just like me typing 12 here. If I'm typing 12 here, then it's creating a range from 0 to 11. Remember that 12 number, this 12 here is not included in the range. It's like the ending limit, but it's not included in the range. I'm going to undo. So length of the total rainfall, which will be 12, create a range from 0 to 11. Each time, the first time this loop iterates, 0 will be assigned to current monthly rainfall index. The last time it iterates is going to assign 11 to the current monthly rainfall index. We can use this value to access the elements in the total rainfall list, which will contain 12 items, okay, with indexes 0 to 11, right? Okay, so each time it iterates, what we want to do is we want to take that current monthly rainfall amount, we access it with the index, current monthly rainfall index, and we store it, we add it to total rainfall. We are going to accumulate the values in total rainfall. So each time it iterates, we're going to take what's already stored in total rainfall. Okay, so total rainfall is going to be equal to total rainfall, what's already stored in total rainfall, plus the current value the current monthly rainfall we are on while it's iterating. So I refer to the total rainfall list, and then the current value we are on. We access that current value with the current monthly rainfall index. We're accumulating. So assuming that, I'm going to use a comment here to explain. Assuming the first value of the list is 12, the second value of the list is, let's say, 4.5. Total rainfall starts off at 0. So it's going to be 0 plus the first amount, which is 12. 0 plus 12 gives you 12. And then 12 is going to be assigned to total rainfall. Next time it iterates, total rainfall is now 12. So it's going to be 12 plus 4.5, which is going to be 16.5 when you add this up. Because 12 plus 4.5, 16.5. And 16.5 is going to be stored in total rainfall. And so on and so forth. It's just an example, just to explain. I'm exceeding this line here, so I'm going to break it somewhere around here. Before you break a line, you type in a backslash, hit enter. So by the time this loop is done, we will have our total rainfall. And then when we're done, just return it. Let's return it so other parts of the program can use it. So return total rainfall this way. And we're done with this function. The next function we want to create is the average monthly rainfall. So I'm going to define a function. I'm going to call it calculate average monthly rainfall. Again, we have to determine if this function is going to accept any argument, so we can define parameters. Well, if it's going to calculate the average monthly rainfall, then first thing we need a total amount, or the total rainfall amount, right? The total rainfall. Because the average is really the total of all the rainfall amounts divided by how many months there are, or divided by how many rainfall amounts there are. So I'm going to define a parameter which is going to be a placeholder for the total rainfall. Okay, total rainfall. We have a function here that's calculating the total rainfall. So we can use our function to get a total and then pass that total to this when we call it. Also, I'm going to need how many rainfall amounts there are. Now, I may not know that, right? So I'm going to define a parameter for the list that contains the rainfall amounts, because when I have the list, then I can try to figure out how many items there are in the list. So I'm going to get the list. I'm going to define a parameter for the total rainfall list. Again, it doesn't matter that these names are the same as these names here. Again, they are like twins, right? But then they're not the same. They're considered different because they're in different functions. So to calculate the average, again, is the total of all the rainfall amounts divided by how many rainfall amounts there are. I have the total rainfall here. All I need to know is how many rainfall amounts there are. And really, how many rainfall amounts there are is really the number of months, right? Because if there are 10 rainfall amounts, then for each month, then there are 10 months. If there are 12 rainfall amounts, and for each month, then there are 12 months. So I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to call it number of months here. And number of months is going to be equal to the length of this list, because again, if this list contains 12 rainfall amounts, then that means there are 12 months. One rainfall amount for each month. I can get the length of this by using the length function and passing in the name of the list. So I'm getting the length of this list here, and I'm storing it in number of months. And when I have the number of months, I can go ahead and calculate our average. So our average rainfall, right? Average rainfall is going to be equal to our total rainfall, which we're going to have passed to this function, divided by the number of months, which we've calculated here. And then that will be our average rainfall. Once we are done, we return our average rainfall. And we're done with this function. The next thing we have to find is the months with the highest and lowest amounts. Now we are finding the months and not the amounts of, basically we are finding the names of the months. Which month has the highest rainfall? Which month has the lowest rainfall? That's what we're finding. So I'm going to define a function. I'm going to call it find highest rainfall month, right? We're finding a month. Again, we have to determine if this function is going to accept any arguments, so we can define parameters. Well, if it's going to find the highest rainfall month, then we need the list that contains the rainfall amounts, so we can know the highest, right? So let's create a parameter, a placeholder for the total rainfall. The rainfall amount list, right? The total rainfall list. Okay, so I'm going to call this total rainfall list. It doesn't matter that the names are the same. These variables are considered different because they are in different functions. The scope of this list, for example, is within this find highest rainfall month function. The scope of these other ones are within their individual functions or respective functions. All right, so if I have a total rainfall list, what I can do with this is I can find, because if I'm finding the highest rainfall month, first what I can do with this is I can find the highest rainfall. Let's find the highest rainfall. It's going to be the rainfall amount. That's not what we need though. We need the highest rainfall month. We can use this, but we can use the highest rainfall amount to find the highest rainfall month. So let's first find the highest rainfall amount. And there's a function called max. I want the max value, the max rainfall amount of this list here. So max rainfall amount will get me the highest rainfall amount though of this list. I'm going to store that in a variable called highest rainfall amount. That's not what we need though. We want the month of the highest rainfall. But if we have the highest rainfall amount from this list, we can use the index function of a list. List functions have an index function that will tell you the index of the first occurrence of any element. This will be an element in this list. We can get the index of it. That index will basically be our month, or the index of our month, right? And so I'm going to call the index function of this list. So total rainfall list, okay, total rainfall list dot index. And what do I want the index of? I want the index of this highest rainfall amount. And this index of this highest rainfall amount in this total rainfall list is going to be the highest rainfall amount index. Highest rainfall amount index. That's going to be our highest rainfall amount index. So if there are 12 amounts in this, 12 rainfall amounts in this list, then they'll have index from 0 to 11. Now remember, somewhere in our main function, when we are creating our program, we're going to create a list containing the names of the months. There will be 12 names in that list, but then they'll have indexes 0 to 11. So if we have the highest rainfall amount index, then we can use that index to access the particular name in a list, in the names of months list. So in this function, let's also pass in. Whoever calls this function has to pass in. Let's define it in such a way that whoever calls this function has to pass in the names of the months, right? The names of the months. So we can use this index to access the particular name and not just an index, okay? So I'm going to define it in such a way that you have to also pass in the names of months, names of months list. And once we have the index, instead of returning just the highest rainfall amount index, let's go ahead and return a string, which will be really the name of the month, because this list here will contain strings which are going to be the names of the months in a year. So return the name of the month. Return the name of the month in this list with index highest rainfall amount index. This way. So this will return a string, okay, with the month with the highest rainfall amount. And we're done with this function as well.